I'm back with Graham Fuller, the former vice chair of the U.S. National Intelligence Council. He worked for the CIA for 25 years, which included a posting in Kabul, Afghanistan, as CIA station chief. And he also worked on Iran. You spoke Farsi at one point fluently, and you still have some command of it. Put in context what's going on in Iran right now in its efforts to create a nuclear weapons program. Is this something that keeps you up at night?
No, it doesn't keep me up at night, although there are obviously those for whom it does. I think you really need to take this whole thing in a broader context. Even the Shah of Iran talked before he fell 30 years ago or so that Iran was a great power in the world. It deserved, quote unquote, a nuclear energy, nuclear capabilities. Second, I think it is an exaggeration that is supported by the facts that there's no evidence of an Iranian weapons program per se. Very clearly, they are becoming ever greater masters of the nuclear cycle, which can lead ultimately to the weaponization of the kind of processing.
And you have a population that supports the idea of nuclear
weapons. And
a
population, I mean, there are probably few populations in the world would say, no, we shouldn't ever have a nuclear weapon. But it's certainly in the case of Iranians, I think their intense national pride and the fact that nearly every one of their neighbors has them is propelling them in that particular direction. But put it this way, Iran is certainly unapologetically going for mastery of the full nuclear cycle of how you develop it and produce it. That is within the confines of what is permitted to them by the IAEA. Whether they go beyond is the major question, and the fear that some view is not even, it's so dangerous, so intolerable that we can't conceive of it. It is very undesirable that Iran should have nuclear weapons. For that matter, I think it's undesirable that there should be, that as many countries have it as do. And furthermore, the more countries inevitably will get it, because we're talking about technology that's getting on towards 100 years old now, or 75 years old. So the question is, how truly dangerous will it be if Iran should at some point decide to get that weapon?
And what happens if Iran says, we are now a nuclear, we have the weapon, the way that Pakistan did, the way that Iran did. What are the ramifications?
The immediate ramification is that everybody in the region is going to step just a little bit more gingerly around the issue. The United States the ability of the United States to threaten Iran with war, I think, begins to ring more hollow. That's exactly why Iran feels that it's necessary to possess the bomb. But the idea that this is somehow a country led by madmen is a pretty crazy idea in itself. We have lived with nuclear weapons with a Stalin, isolated, paranoid. We've lived with Mao Zedong, who said that China could absorb a nuclear war and lose 100 million people, and it was nothing. We live with it with Kim Il-sung's North Korea, which is arguably closer to being a crazy country.
But then you have Israel, who basically vows that they'll attack, they'll do preemptive strikes. They have Dolphin-class nuclear subs off the coast. And that seems to be a factor that you don't have with North Korea or with any of the other places you're talking about, where you have this nuclear country right close by, who's basically saying, if you do this, we will attack you, which could have pretty serious ramifications.
It absolutely would have serious ramifications. It could even drag the United States itself into a war. But the United States, whatever Israel does, the United States will take full blame for that, and not without reason. But the point is whether, in fact, wiser heads will prevail and avoid the military sanction. No serious thinkers believe that you could, one, fully destroy all these capabilities. Second, the capabilities are up here in the mind, so that they could be, after 2, 3, 4 years, reproduced, recreated. Thirdly, the kind of destabilization in the region would be incalculable. And it would be yet one more American war.
But you don't see
the
Iran
least winnable
handing over nuclear weapons to Hezbollah or to any groups like that?
I don't, basically, but that's my guess, and others might say no, it could happen, but I tend to think not.
Well, you have been conscious of the importance of Iran and the sphere of influence around Iran for a long time, going back to the Cold War. When you were in the CIA, you had written, I guess, a report in the 80s, mid-80s, 85, was it?
Early 80s.
Early 80s, about Russia.
You're right, mid-80s.
Russia was, of course, trying to influence Iran during the Cold War, and you had suggested that what if the U.S. were to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but covertly, essentially supply arms?
My concern was that every single nation in the world was opposing Iran in the war between Iran and Iraq, with Saddam Hussein on the other side, so two very unlovely people. My concern was that the Soviet Union, which had long had very, very strong ambitions towards achieving power, dominating Iran, would take advantage of this point of tremendous weakness in Iran by offering them all kinds of weapon sales and other such things. It could well have happened, that type of thing had happened before. In the event, it didn't happen, but my suggestion was that the West, even if not the United States, should have some handle in Iran by offering it some lower level weapons and to fight in that war, rather than having the Soviet Union the sole source of weapons to that country.
Well, before we talked about how really smart people within the intelligence apparatus write reports and they're sort of ignored by the policymakers. This is a case where they did the opposite. They sort of took your idea and went really to town with it. It turned into the Iran-Contra
Exactly.
affair.
I mean, this went way beyond my wild imagination or even suggestions, because they then turned to the whole Contra affair and got illegal funding from that and flew to Tehran with cakes and Bibles and whatever else. So it turned into a really crazy thing. But the geopolitical concept behind it was, don't allow Iran to become so totally isolated that it's easy prey for total Soviet dominance.
Right. Were you pulled into that whole post-Iran-Contra hearings?
No, mercifully, thank God I was not, because I would have been quite tarnished by it. I simply presented the idea that there was a serious geopolitical risk at stake here. But at that point, I was in the analytical side and working on policy side, so it was the operators that went off, with mainly from the White House, who proceeded to take cakes and Bibles to Iran with Contra money.
Well, we have to take a quick break for a commercial, but all the countries we've been talking about are countries with the Muslim religion as the major religion. You've just written a book, Imagining the World Without Islam. We'll talk about that and more after the short break with Graham Fuller.